We were still seated when I realized he was gone. The chair across from me was empty, his jacket gone, his phone silent. Nearby tables had noticed. A waiter hesitated, watching me like I might explode. I unfolded the napkin and read his note, written like a prank. "The bill is yours. Good luck paying it, huh?" An $800 check landed between my hands. I didn't chase him. I didn't explain. I ordered dessert, asked for the manager, and paid calmly. The room stayed quiet. They expected tears. I gave them something else instead. That was the beginning. This wasn't the first time he had tried to make me feel small in public. It was just the first time he'd done it so cleanly, with witnesses and a receipt. We had been married 6 years. Long enough that people assumed stability. Long enough that friends said things like, "At least he's reliable," or "He's practical, not emotional." That word followed him everywhere. Practical. As if practicality explained why he forgot my birthday but remembered his boss's dog's name. As if it justified why every decision tilted in his favor and every inconvenience landed in my lap. He worked in finance. Not high level, but close enough to power that he liked to borrow its tone. When he spoke, it was with certainty. When I disagreed, it was framed as me being sensitive. If I pushed back, he'd sigh and say, "Let's not make a scene." That phrase mattered to him more than fairness. At home, he controlled money without ever saying he did. His account paid the mortgage. Mine covered groceries and extras. Dinners out were his idea when he wanted to look generous, and suddenly my responsibility when it came time to settle the bill. I noticed the pattern early, but patterns are easy to excuse when you're still trying to be chosen. That night at the restaurant wasn't spontaneous. He had picked the place. He had ordered the wine. He had suggested I wear something nice because this crowd notices. I thought it was a date. It wasn't. It was a setup. Later, I realized the authority figure in that room wasn't him. It was the setting. The staff. The unspoken rules of embarrassment. He knew I wouldn't shout. He knew I wouldn't call him. He knew I would sit there quietly and absorb it, the way I always had. What hurt more than the note was how smooth it all went. No resistance. No one intervened. The waiter didn't ask if everything was okay. The manager didn't check in until I asked. Other diners looked away, relieved it wasn't their problem. Convenience won over fairness every time. When I asked for the manager, I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't raise my voice. I simply explained that my husband had left and that I would be paying. The manager nodded, grateful for how easy I was making it. That nod told me everything. Calm people are easier to manage than upset ones. Silence keeps systems running. I paid with my card. I tipped well. I thanked them for the evening. I walked out alone. In the car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine. I didn't text him. I didn't call. I drove home like it was any other night. When he came in later, smelling like street air and confidence, he laughed. He actually laughed. Said it was just a joke and that I needed to learn how to take one. I watched him carefully then. The way he loosened his tie. The way he waited for my reaction. He wanted proof that it landed. That he still had permission to cross lines and call them humor. I said nothing. I went to bed early. And for the first time, I stopped trying to understand him. After that night, something shifted. Not in him. In me. Once you stop explaining someone's behavior, patterns stop hiding. They stand still. They repeat themselves without effort. I began noticing how often he left decisions unfinished and let them fall to me. How he would agree to things publicly, then quietly back out later and say I must have misunderstood. How money conversations always ended with me feeling irresponsible, even when I had paid more than my share. He never raised his voice. He never needed to. He relied on timing and distance. On doing things when no one would challenge him. He liked situations where I had no leverage. Restaurants. Family gatherings. Work events. Places where politeness mattered more than truth. If I disagreed, he'd smile and say, "We'll talk later." Later never came. And if it did, it came softened, reframed, diluted until the original issue sounded silly. I used to think he didn't see me struggling. That maybe if I explained it better, slower, he'd understand. That belief kept me busy. It kept me quiet. Looking back, I understand now that he understood perfectly. He just didn't care enough to change. Convenience always came first. His comfort. His image. His control over how things looked from the outside. There were other moments. Smaller ones. The time he booked a trip and forgot to include my return flight because it was cheaper to book separately. The dinner with his colleagues where he introduced me without my name, just as my wife. The argument where he told me, calmly, that if I wanted equality, I should earn more. Each time, I swallowed it. Each time, I told myself this was marriage. Compromise. Reality. But the restaurant night changed the scale. It wasn't just private anymore. It was performative. He wanted an audience. And I realized something uncomfortable. He enjoyed knowing I would handle it. That I would clean up the mess quietly. That I would protect him from consequences. That realization hurt more than anger ever could. I started pulling back in small ways. Not dramatic ones. I stopped covering for him. If he forgot something, I didn't fix it. If he was late, I didn't apologize on his behalf. I watched how quickly people noticed. How often his easygoing image relied on my effort behind the scenes. At home, he sensed the distance. He asked if something was wrong, but his tone was casual, like he already knew the answer wouldn't cost him anything. I said I was tired. That was true. I began keeping quiet records. Dates. Receipts. Messages. Not because I planned anything, but because something in me no longer trusted memory alone. I needed facts. Proof that I wasn't imagining it. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was understanding that I had been optional all along. That my role was to absorb discomfort so his life stayed smooth. That the dinner wasn't a mistake. It was a summary. Once you see that, you can't unsee it. The boundary was crossed on an ordinary Tuesday, which somehow made it worse. I came home to find an envelope on the counter. My name was on it, written in his handwriting. Inside was a notice from our bank. A joint account I didn't even know had been opened months earlier had been closed. The balance was 0. The reason was printed clearly. Funds transferred. Authorized by him. I sat at the table and waited. When he came in, I asked one question. Where did the money go? He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He said it made sense at the time. That he needed to cover something urgent. That it was temporary. Then he added, very calmly, that since his income was higher, it was ultimately his decision. He said this like it was common sense, like I was slow for needing it explained. That was the moment something in me went quiet. It wasn't just about the money. It was about access. He had crossed from emotional convenience into financial control. He hadn't asked. He hadn't warned me. He had assumed I would adapt, like always. And he had done it with paperwork, signatures, systems that favored him by default. I realized then how exposed I had been. How much I had trusted process instead of intention. How many times I had told myself that love didn't keep score, while he had been keeping very careful track. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I asked for details. Dates. Amounts. Explanations. He grew irritated, said I was interrogating him, said I was overreacting. That word again. Overreacting. It was always used when I got close to the truth. That night, I slept in the guest room. Not to punish him. To think. In the quiet, I replayed years of moments I had brushed aside. The jokes. The disappearances. The way he liked situations where I had no leverage and no witnesses willing to help. The next day, I called a lawyer during my lunch break. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't threaten him. I asked questions and took notes. I learned what my options were and, more importantly, what my risks had been. I opened an account in my own name. I changed passwords. I redirected my income. Each step was small, invisible. He didn't notice. He rarely noticed anything that didn't inconvenience him directly. At home, I became quieter. Not cold. Just absent. I stopped sharing my thoughts. I stopped planning ahead with him. I stopped trying to be understood. That was the real boundary. The moment I stopped seeking belonging from someone who benefited from my silence. He sensed it eventually. Asked if I was pulling away. I said I was focusing on work. Another truth that cost me nothing. The dinner at the restaurant had humiliated me publicly. This had stripped me privately. And I understood then that if I stayed, there would always be another line crossed, another explanation offered afterward. So I began preparing to leave, calmly, without announcing it. I didn't leave all at once. I stepped back slowly, the way you do when you realize the ground under you isn't solid. I stopped reacting first. That confused him more than anger ever had. When he made comments meant to provoke me, I nodded. When he disappeared for hours, I didn't ask where he'd been. When he tried to recreate the version of me that smoothed things over, I stayed neutral. Calm became my distance. I finalized things quietly. The lawyer filed what needed to be filed. Accounts were separated. Documents were copied and stored. Nothing dramatic happened. No scene. No confrontation. He only realized something was wrong when he tried to access money that was no longer there. He asked questions then. Not apologies. Questions. Where did this go? Why wasn't he informed? His tone was still practical, still certain he was entitled to explanations. I told him everything had been handled properly and within the law. That was all. The fallout didn't come from me. It came from the gaps he left behind. Friends began noticing inconsistencies. Stories didn't line up anymore because I wasn't there to quietly fix them. At work events, people asked where I was. He laughed it off at first, but laughter doesn't last when it isn't backed by someone doing the work. Financially, things tightened for him. Not dramatically, but enough to be uncomfortable. He had relied on my stability more than he admitted. When that disappeared, his control looked less impressive. Socially, the story shifted. Not because I told it. Because when people asked me what happened, I didn't defend him. I didn't attack him either. I said we wanted different things and left it there. Silence leaves room for others to connect dots on their own. The final conversation between us was brief. He said he never thought I'd actually leave. I believed him. I said I had learned a lot. That was true too. I moved into a smaller place. It was quiet. It was mine. The first night there, I ate dinner alone without checking my phone or worrying about anyone else's comfort. There was no applause. No relief rush. Just steadiness. Months later, I heard he was still telling the restaurant story, but differently now. He said I had embarrassed him. That I had overreacted. That people had misunderstood his joke. No one laughed. I didn't correct him. The truth didn't need my voice anymore. It had his behavior, his patterns, and the absence of someone willing to carry them for him. I kept moving forward. Calmly. Quietly. Without looking back.